Previously, on how to read a birth chart, I showed you how to calculate the elemental balance. Now in this episode, I'm going to show you how to use that calculation for interpretations. So the interpretation of your elements is very sensitive to the context of the rest of your chart. So first thing I would like to do is explain to you what each of the four elements represents, symbolically speaking. The first element that I'd like to look at is fire. This is the element of Aries and its trines, Leo and Sagittarius. Now each element has two key traits, which are the root of its symbolism. For fire, these two traits are the fact that it's bright and it's hot. If you keep those two things in mind, bright and hot, you'll be able to remember the rest of the symbolism that I'm going to show you. And I want to mention to you that fire is the most masculine element, and it represents the principle of dharma. You'll see why when you see the symbolism associated with bright and hot. Now, as for it being bright, what that implies, symbolically speaking, is that fire is clear. Brightness makes things clear. And fire is definite or decisive. When things are clear, then you can make a clear decision. It's definite. You can see a difference between this and that and make your choice. Then it's got a moral character to it. Not this, that. That's wrong, this is right. That's why it's associated with dharma. And now fire is also hot. So the heat of fire has two symbolic implications. First of all, it's powerful. Fire is very powerful and punishing. If you transgress what fire determines as immoral, then fire is going to burn you. It's going to punish you. And the heat gives the power, and the power enables leadership. Fire is a leadership element. And that goes along with it being moral, and it goes along with it being decisive. Now let's turn our attention to the next element, water. This is the element that is rooted in Cancer and Cancer's trines, which are Pisces and Scorpio. So the two key traits of water, which form the root of all the rest of the things it symbolizes, are the fact that water is reflective and soft. Water is very feminine, just as fire is very masculine. Water is very feminine, and it represents moksha. You'll see why when we show the symbolic tree here that's associated with water. So the fact that water is very reflective, it's nature's mirror. You go look into the water and you can usually see a reflection of yourself. So this fact gives water three symbolic traits. It's introspective. That's one thing that reflective means. You look at yourself. You look into yourself or you look at yourself. So water is introspective. And water, because it's reflective and it's also deep, this is another associated trait with reflective, therefore it's emotional. Introspective, looking within, getting in touch with emotions. So water is emotional and introspective, and therefore since it's inwardly focused, it's not extroverted. It's introverted, so it's mysterious, and it has those traits of being shy and quiet. And the other thing about water is that it's soft. And the softness of water gives it these two symbolic traits. It's gentle and flexible. So water is not punishing and decisive like fire. It's flexible, it's not decisive, and it's gentle, it's not punishing. Now let's look at the third of the four elements, earth. Earth, you'll find it rooted in Capricorn and Capricorn's trines, Virgo and Taurus. Just like every other element, it has two key traits. It's solid and it's fertile. That's where we grow all our food, in the earth. So the earth is the abundance. And not only food, but all the gold, silver, diamonds, sapphires, everything comes from the earth. So the earth is solid and fertile. It's also a feminine element, but not very feminine like water. It's moderately feminine because it has a bit of the masculinity of solidity. And it's associated with the artha pursuit, pursuing economic growth and economic stability. Okay, so there's three symbolic things about Earth that stem from the fact that it's very solid. Whenever you see the Earth element, you should be seeing reliability, stability, endurance. Right? So Earth is very solid, it endures, and it's reliable. You know it's always going to be there. And because it's solid, it's practical, it's touchable, it's tangible. So the Earth element is interested in tangible, practical, real, touchable things. Things with a solid form, things with a real form. Okay, and then out of the fact that Earth is fertile, you're going to get these other two symbolic traits, which is that Earth is healthy, because you can't be fertile unless you're healthy, and wealthy. Fertility brings all the food and all the abundance, all the gold, all the jewels. And now let's look at the last element, air. Air is rooted in Libra and Libra's trines, which are Gemini and Aquarius. Just like every element, it has two key facts, two key things about it. It's pleasant, but it's temporary. So these two facts about air, pleasant and temporary, are the root of all of its symbolism in astrological use. It is going to be a masculine element, but not very masculine like fire. Fire and air, you can see they work together, right? Earth and water, they're both feminine, they work together. You put earth and water together and you grow things. You put air and fire together and the fire burns. So air and fire are both masculine and earth and water are both feminine, but air is a moderate masculinity because it has the feminine element of being pleasant. And out of the four pursuits in life, air represents kama, or pleasure. As a result of air being pleasant, there are two initial symbolic things to keep in mind. Whenever you see air, you should see an enlivening, quickening, exciting nature, bringing things to life. That's what air does, right? You breathe it and you come to life. And then the other thing about air is that it moves around and it goes everywhere and goes to everyone. So air is a very moving, free element. It's going to have a nature of sharing and touching everybody and connecting many things. Now, each one of these two, the enlivening nature of air and the connecting or sharing nature of air, each one has another implication. Because it's enlivening, it's intelligent. It brings quickness. It brings alertness. It brings awakeness. So it's intelligent. Not intelligent like water, which is very intelligent about introspection, but air is very intelligent about extroversion. It's very intelligent and clever about how to do things, about how to understand the way things work. And it's also intelligent in a fun way, so it's witty. And then because air is connecting everything and moving back and forth, and because you can't speak without air, our whole vocal cord, vocal apparatus works on the air. So air signifies communication and words, speaking. Since air is temporary, it moves around all the time, therefore it's unreliable, distinct from Earth. Unlike Earth, air is very unreliable, unsteady. Okay, so now you know what each of the four elements represents. Of course, you're going to have to study it and internalize it. And from the previous episode, you know how to calculate the elemental balance in a chart. So now let's look at a few interpretations. We have our famous three characters that we keep using throughout this series: Donald Trump, Albert Einstein, and Marilyn Monroe, and the fourth famous character, me. And let's look at these charts according to the way I calculate in my complete chart assessment report, which you can get for yourself if you go to vicdecara.com/R2. Or if you just go to my site, vicdecara.com, and click on readings and click on the complete chart assessment. If you look at Einstein's elemental balance, you don't get that much information because everything's balanced. He doesn't have any element that's notably excessive or deficient. So this in and of itself tells you that there's nothing particularly out of whack or unusual or excessive or deficient about his elemental symbolisms. If you look at Donald Trump, this is a very interesting elemental balance to look at. He has strong deficiency of earth and a bit of an excess of water. His fire and his air are balanced, so that's fine. So his masculinity is balanced, right? And fire and air, that means he's able to do leadership and he's able to do enjoyment of life. Those are balanced, but his feminine elements are out of balance. That's an interesting point there. With this, it's going to be a good illustration of how sensitive this is to the context of the whole chart. When you see low Earth, you may think, whoa, Donald Trump is totally interested. He's totally materialistic. Earth is the element that's all about wealth. So how can you have a deficient wealth? Well, this is why you have to work in the context. His context is that his moon is in Jeshta, and he has Mars in Magha as his ascendant. So the deficient Earth is not going to be able to take down his ambition to be the best. That's the main thing already established by the larger context, that he's got Mars in Magha and the moon in Jeshta. His whole life is focused around an ambition to be top dog. So that's his thing about wealth, really, is just a symbol of him being the best. What this is really telling you about him is that he's impractical. When you have two elements out of balance, don't just interpret them individually, put them together. So excessive water and deficient earth together, there's a great deal of impracticality, a lot of ideas, a lot of thoughts, a lot of feelings about things. You may think he's not a feeling person, but that's all he is. It's just all about feelings and riling up people's feelings. And nothing that he's really doing or saying is practical at all. Build a wall. Build a wall between America and Mexico, or stop this country, people from coming into our country. All these very, very impractical, but very, very emotional ideas. So what I say in my out-of-the-box interpretation of excessive water deficient earth is impracticality, idealistic emotions without sufficient application and practical expression, ample inspiration and ideas, but insufficient practicality and patience to give them much tangible form. So that's his problem. Okay, so with Trump, you can really see how you have to watch out for making an interpretation of your elements that contradicts the interpretation associated with the ascendant and the moon. Okay, because the elements are so simple that they're very sensitive to the bigger details. But you can also see with Trump how your basic out-of-the-box interpretation works very well. Now, let's look at Marilyn. Her earth is deficient, like Donald Trump, but instead of water being excessive, air is excessive. So she's got excessive air and deficient earth. So when you put those two together, the opposite thing between air and earth is reliability and unreliability, stability and constant change. So that's the clash that becomes prominent when air is high and earth is low. So what I say in my out-of-the-box interpretive text for excessive air and deficient earth is excessively changing preferences and desires. Easily bored, easily distracted, lacking stability and reliability. Now, let's compare this to me. This is an interesting comparison because I'm exactly the opposite. I have excessive earth and deficient air. She has excessive air, deficient earth. So when it's excessive air, deficient earth, then there's too much karma, too much desire for karma, not enough for artha. Right? So Marilyn Monroe is enjoying life at the expense of her health. She's enjoying life at the expense of her stability and long-term growth and happiness. But in my case, it's the opposite. Too much practicality, not enough fun. Not enough fun. Too much work, not enough fun. Too serious, inflexible. So my out-of-the-box text for excessive earth and deficient air is inflexibility. Overly practical, tangible, and opinionated. Difficulty socializing because of being too serious. Difficulty relaxing, always working towards some goal. Unable to just enjoy the moment. Okay, so if you take that information about how to calculate your elemental balance and you take the information about what the elements represent and you get a head start by thinking about these three example interpretations I've shown you, then you can go a long way to mastering the interpretations of the elemental balances in any chart. If you want more of a head start and more of a personal application of this, get my chart assessment for yourself. And you can do that at my site, victorcara.com/R2. That will take you straight to the chart assessment page. Or just go to the site and click on readings and then click on the complete chart assessment. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time for the next installment of How to Read a Birth Chart.